Hello, this is Michael Hexter, and welcome to my Politics 2100 channel here on YouTube. So, this episode I'm calling The Right Wing Taps Into and Mobilizes Our Paranoid-Schizoid Core. So, this is a somewhat different approach on this episode where I'm talking about a psychoanalytic theory and applying it to contemporary politics. And this is a theory that is been widely applied, or is the basis, let's say, is the theoretical basis of some somewhat more widely applied psychoanalytic therapies and approaches to human suffering. They originate in the work of Melanie Klein, who was born in the 1880s and died in 1960. She was originally from Austria, lived in Hungary for a while, and then eventually moved to Great Britain. And she's the originator of what's called the object relations schools of psychoanalysis. And it's probably the most diverse bunch of different theories within the psychoanalytic big tent, and they're unorthodox relative to what Sigmund Freud originally proposed, though they are a spin-off from his ideas. And it's called quote unquote object relations because in psychoanalytic terminology, which also borrows from philosophy, the subject is the person and the object are objects are people around the subject. So the core focus of the therapy or whatever, or the analysis being one person being quote unquote the subject. So object relations means that the human psychology is formed by different relations early on in life, and they are using Freud's terminology, quote unquote, introjects into the psychology of the person, and it gets more into, there is some empirical study that suggests that some spin-offs of object relations theory, for instance, attachment theory, the observing how infants and parents interact, you can sort of figure out what type of attachment style the child has, and so this can lead to some predictions about how well they do later on, and what issues might come up for that particular person if they have a particular attachment style. So, but anyway, that's not really what I'm talking about today. So the very basic part of Melanie Klein's theory is kind of wild sounding and weird, but even though it's so wild sounding, I have thought for many years that it is actually a very good description that fits into what we would imagine would be the evolutionary trajectory of humanity, of human beings, integrated into the natural world among other animals. In other words, that we are a human animal, and that we become human through become more human through our socialization, through early relations with caregivers and with peers, with people around us, and then eventually with the society that we live in more generally. And so in her theory, there are these two positions that are supposed to occur. One is the very earliest position that's supposed to occur in the very early first year or so of life. And then there's a second position, which is the mature position, even though it arrives very early on, let's say 2 or 3 years old. And it sort of predates even some of the Freudian stages. It's an earlier view of the psychology. But it's all of this, Freud and also Klein's ideas are pretty much reconstructions from adults or older children, or who can talk, or just, they somehow, their theories based on the behavior of people, or what people say when they're much older than when these theories suppose happen earlier on in life. So, but the theory is plausible in the sense that, there's the first position is called Paranoid-Schizoid position. So the Paranoid-Schizoid position is, like it sounds, is basically the human being is born, the young baby is born paranoid and schizoid. In other words, schizoid means cut off from other relationships with other people, or not entirely cut off, but withdrawing from those relations, and paranoid being fearful of dangers. In other words, so it's kind of a little bit of a darker or grim view of what a young baby is going through. But when you think about young babies, they often have frights, and they often become upset for reasons that are entirely unknown to the parents and to people around them. And you can't ask the baby what's going on because the baby doesn't have language yet. And so the theory presupposes that this baby is like a young animal in some sense, that is fearful, and that is if you think of our earlier ancestors, or we grew up as prey animals, in the savannas of Africa and so forth and so on. So as a species, so to be fearful and to be afraid, it would be adaptive for a vulnerable child or a vulnerable group of people, even though to create a social group you need to also trust other people. So the second stage is the depressive stage. So this is also kind of, both of these labels have a sort of pathological hue to them. But anyway, the second stage, depressive stage, is when the baby decides to give up some of the wild fantasies of the earlier paranoid schizoid position and decides to accept that the world outside is real to some degree, and that the parents are real, and that you need to and why it's called depressive is that you're giving up this sort of the grandiosity, the omnipotence supposedly of the earlier position. So that the theory in both Freud and also in Klein is that we have in us, when we start out, a kind of a feeling of omnipotence in our core beliefs, that somehow our thoughts are real and that we could make magical things happen with our minds. That's omnipotence, and that gradually, or in some sense in a shift in early childhood, realize, no, wait a minute, that's something that's inside us, and it's not how actually the world works. And so the depressive position is, in a way, allowing a more realistic, and start to engage with people in a realer way, rather than in the terms of the paranoid schizoid position. So you kind of get the sense sometimes that some people, when you meet them, and you talk to them and whatever, that they're living, people of a certain, whatever type, that they do live in this side of the world that's of fear and distrust. And there are some people who are also very disturbed, obviously paranoid schizophrenics. I mean, literally paranoid schizoid is not quite schizophrenia, but it's close in terms of the terminology and the behavior. So you have people who actually act out this sense of a world full of fear, a world full of danger, and that there are lots of people who live internally in such a world of fear and danger. So, and the idea is that when you grow up, you suppress, or you are able to overcome these early fears and dangers, and learn to trust other people, to develop there's another term from object relations psychology, object relations psychoanalysis, is that there's a basic trust that develops in the world, and that basic trust enables growth, enables cooperation with caregivers and also with other kids, and you start to develop as a child, and eventually becoming an adult, becoming an adolescent, and then an adult. And so the anyway, the idea of us having this paranoid schizoid cord does seem to, anyway, it resonates with sort of a simple speculative idea about why babies seem so afraid sometimes, and they're not always just simply trusting of everybody and that they gradually they can take in the world, they can take in the love of the parents, the love of their surrounding environment, and eventually they become more secure and less fearful, and so forth and so on. And this is what, quote unquote, the depressive position that, again, it's sounding negative, but it's really a positive from the point of view of human development. But anyway, so in terms of U.S. politics, or not just U.S. politics in general, it seems to me as though the right wing wants to keep people in the paranoid schizoid position. In other words, wants to keep people in a state of fear. And there are some people who are already predisposed to feel fear and to be fearful. And that's been studied in terms of the right wing, or psychologically, quote unquote, conservatives, or people on the right side of the political spectrum have a higher have a bigger startle response. They tend to be more likely to, fear tends to distort their perception more than people on the left end of the spectrum. And so, anyway, so that this, so you can see how all of the work of the right wing is about, or how they. So again, we're working with a model in this channel of a two-layer right wing. So we have the leaders and we have the followers. So the leaders are sociopaths generally, who are exploiting and are manipulating other people to feel fear. Okay, and they themselves may or may not feel that same fear. They themselves may or not, maybe or not feel as their followers do. In some form or other, in a way, but they see it as a game. They're playing predators to the prey, which is their constituency, of preying on the fears of their base. And so this relationship of keeps them, triggering alarm and in them, and constantly finding threats from the outside. Okay, almost always from the outside, that is somehow from outside their quote unquote ethnic group, and to stir up these fears and keep people in a constant state of fear. And the other thing is that they are also creating a world themselves that is a shape-shifting. They don't care. They do not want the basic trust in social institutions that leads people to trust government, among other things, to trust. They want to create a world. They like the idea of, of a constantly competitive and dark and abusive world, in a way that people are abusing other people. They want to either they want to create a constant treadmill for their followers, of the sense that there can be no trust, really basic trust in the world. There can be no, so the use of things like gaslighting, the use of creating a reality of constantly lying, which comes very easily to sociopaths. And so now you could say also the sociopaths are also living within their own paranoid schizoid psychology, but they're projecting it outward. They're creating conditions on the outside by creating around them a world that is, by their actions, by preying on other people, by creating distrust, by lying constantly. They are projecting outward, in inner sense, their own paranoid schizoid state. So they are living too within this paranoid-schizoid world. So anyway, I know this is it's hard to use these words. They sound strange, and they are from psychopathology. They're describing, they come from the psychiatric terminology, some of it, but people use the word paranoid, and schizoid could very well also be used as paranoid. People just don't know the word so well. But anyway, I think that you see the effort to strip down our society and people's personalities to a fearful world of dog eat dog and constant victimization of one against the other, that is about keeping people away from their higher faculties, the things that you acquire in school, in when you grow up, when you learn about the world. They're trying to put that always in doubt, and they're trying to bring people back into this early state of confusion and fear. And for some people, that state feels like home in a way. It feels like what they know, and so or at least, and I think we all, Melanie Klein would say, or we all know that. In other words, we all have within us the capacity to be stripped down to that paranoid schizoid core. So, but the task, the political task of opponents of the right wing and of the neo-fascists is to reinforce and to create the social bonds that are based on the higher functions of our minds and of our ability to socialize and to create relationships, and that are not based on pure exploitation and pure fear and about simply for instance bullying or whatever, creating a dog eat dog world, where everybody is either in one gang or another gang and beating on the other gang to quote unquote win. So anyway, so this is kind of a marker. This particular episode is a marker. So I can be applied to. You look at how the right wing operates, and I think this is a pretty good description of how they, on a fundamental psychological level, the world they're trying to create, the world of fear, the world of distrust, and that the counter movement is to create a world based on the functions of recognition of reality, of trust in other people. You can be trusted with verify. You don't need to blindly trust, but you need to at least be working toward trust and understand that trust is in other people is a better state to be in than the state of isolation and fearful disjointedness from society and from relationships with other people. So anyway, again, to be continued, but I just wanted to put this out there. And if you have any reactions or thoughts, please put them in the comments. And if you like this video, please like. And if you're enjoying the content on my channel, please subscribe. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.